we have a lot of strength on the community side, but in terms of utilizing that communal strength to actually stand our ground on these other things, there we tend to cave. Islamic economics, really, it is free market capitalism.
Well, yeah. So last time we had a very good discussion about your early life and the specific influences that led you to question the status quo, let's call it. And what I found very interesting is the point that you made about the importance that Muslims don't make strategic or alliances with out of a point of weakness.
Yes.
And this I wanted to ask about your experience, like when you became or decided to become Muslim or were thinking about it. Would you like say that you saw some superior characteristics of the Muslim community, or or did you see them as a strong community, or did you come to Islam out of trying to help?
Yeah, so my experience for me was alhamdulillah, because I have a lot of Muslim friends. So I would say maybe even before I became a Muslim, probably 95% of my friends were Muslims. So they're all, Lebanese, Somali, from so I was surrounded by Muslims. So I had good insight into how the Muslim community was. And for me, it was never something, I'm not going to say I recognized necessarily strength, but I recognized definitely a very different model of community to what I would see from the typical Western community. And I think I had probably started to reach that stage where I started to realize things that, there was really a lack of community spirit. There's a lack of community spirit, but probably more so in London, in the UK, than anywhere else, but because London is very unique. But this kind of makeup of the community in London, it's almost non-existent, right? Like people don't really have relationships with their neighbors and get together as communities. My experience and my view of a community in London was very disjointed. Everyone remained with their own households, and there wasn't really that kind of community support that I would see from the Muslims that I knew, and that I would see from the way that they would always get together. Everything was not, it was family orientated, but that involved everyone from outside the family as well, right? So
there's like a point of strength in Muslim communities, right? Like the strong family ties and so it's something that can attract people who want to live in this healthy way, and and it attracts more healthy people, right, to the idea.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and to me, that was a much better example of how one should live their life and how one should aspire to try and be in a community, right? And I think definitely one thing I learned more of when once I became Muslim, and you go and you listen to the khutbahs and you spend more time with other Muslims, is that you start to realize that actually there's this really important message in Islam that I hear from a number of imams all the time, and I love it when I hear it, is that your role as a member of a community, as a Muslim, is not just in respect to other Muslims. It's not just to be a good member of the community amongst Muslims and to help that Muslim community. It is to be wherever you are, no matter who your neighbors are, what religion they are, what ethnicity, doesn't matter. You are, as a Muslim, responsible for being a good member of that community. So if in London, that means all your neighbors, they could be white English atheists, you're still responsible for making sure that your community is doing well and that people are helped when they need to be helped, and that your community, like things are kept tidy and clean, and you're not a nuisance to your community, you know. And that's, to me, is one thing that to me is just so appealing, is that this idea of community, and that bottom up approach to things is so strong in Islam, and it's reinforced constantly. Um, and I love when I see it in action. I love when I hear people talking about it. I love when I hear imams trying to encourage like the younger Muslims to make sure that they're upholding that part of the religion,
Yeah.
because that is our responsibility. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's the thing that you do notice though is that, you know, from a position of influence and kind of, I guess, in I don't want to say enforcing our way in from like a like trying to when I say that, I don't mean like trying to enforce the Sharia upon upon like the local people or anything like that, but you know, in terms of standing our ground in some of the things that we're meant to stand our ground on. I feel like maybe in the West we don't do that as much. And what I mean by that is we easily fall into the cultural norms of like the rat race and the kind of, especially in London, that really high pace, just constantly trying to increase your income. You know, very little time on the important things, and not only that, but kind of refute. I find that as I've, you know, learned more about Islam and learned more about the ways that we should be conducting ourselves in relation to the way we run businesses, the way we conduct our work, the way we conduct finances and transactions, is that I feel like we don't do enough to stand our ground there and say we don't operate in this way. You know, that's a place that I feel that Muslims in the West lack strength. We have a lot of strength on the community side, um,
Mm.
but in terms of utilizing that communal strength to actually stand our ground on these other things, there we tend to cave, like we cave.
It's because we ourselves did not educate ourselves, or the state propaganda in the Muslim world did not educate uh, enough about the financial uh, tools that Islam brought to the world,
Yeah,
and and this is something very important in the Quran, because there is a lot of ayahs about the scales and the importance of
hmm,
that the scales be very standardized and fair to people in conducting trade, and there's also a lot of commands about riba,
yeah,
very obviously, and the soundness of money and of contracts between Muslims, and we tend to concentrate about the spiritual uh, parts of Islam, because these are not so, you know, they don't create so much tension with the state, because
yeah,
the states in our countries is unfortunately based on riba and on the international monetary system. So so thing is that Islam was able to be so influential because it offered people a better way to conduct trade and to adopt sound money.
yeah,
You know, sound money was a problem at that point, at that time of history, because you know the Romans were diluting their money, and there were always attempts from the state to, you know, raise more taxes,
yeah,
etc., etc. and Islam came with a totally different way of conducting trade, and we forget that the Prophet ﷺ was a trader, so his education and his
Yes.
experience was in trading before he became a prophet, right? And this is something that I think maybe you found in Bitcoin, maybe, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah. And it's one of those things that I feel like we neglect it because it's one of those things that you don't go, you don't really pay as much attention to this side of what the Quran and the Hadith teach until you start to learn more about money anyway, and just in general, that kind of inquiry into how money works and how economies work and starting to ask why of certain things, and then you start to find these these huge references in Islam to these very things, and you see these examples laid out for us from the very start of how we're meant to conduct ourselves in these matters, and how we're meant to conduct trade, how we're meant to exchange with each other, fairness in exchange, the kind of practices put in place to avoid monopolies. But you don't really you have to go. It's almost like you have to take that journey to exploring that side of Islam, because it's not really talked about much. You don't really often go to a khutbah and hear someone talking in depth about these parts of Islam and relating it to the modern world. But once you start asking the questions, you quickly see, once you start asking the questions, even from a non-religious perspective, just from a societal and economic perspective, maybe you're questioning why things are the way they are. Why do we have inflation? Why, why does it feel like the cost of everything just goes up faster than you can make money? You've immediately sensed that something is not right. Um, and then the benefit of having faith in Islam and having the Quran and the Sunnah to rely on and to refer to when it comes to these kinds of matters, you start to see actually there is so much there. It's all laid out. It's all laid out. The warnings of these things are there, and the Sharia is full of things that help protect us from reaching this stage. Unfortunately, we haven't heeded those warnings, and
yeah.
and here we are. But
How
yeah,
did you how did you there's a propaganda, let's say, or misinformation within the Muslim community that Bitcoin is haram and it's speculative and it's about gambling. How did you escape this misinformation? Let's say,
yeah.
how did yeah.
So for me, it was comparing it to things which are considered halal, right? So you look at that, and if we say that, if you just look at it logically, okay, um, the reasons that are given for Bitcoin being haram, let's take some of the most obvious ones. Um, One of the biggest ones is that it's used for criminal purposes, right?
Mhm.
This is a big one, and the reality is that um, you can use many things for criminal purposes. So when you look at it logically, and you actually look at what is being the accusation that's being put, is that I can use gold for criminal purposes. If I take gold and I use it to do something nefarious, does that make gold haram? If I take cash, and bear in mind that the majority of organized crime in the world, the majority of the drug trade is all done in cash, does that make the use of cash haram? Because someone can choose to use it in a certain way, and then you take it's the same thing when you look at the gambling element of it. There's two angles to the gambling element that would typically be the accusation would typically revolve around. The first um, is that it's akin to gambling because you were just buying it in the hope that someone else in the future wants to pay more for it. And when people say that, and this is for me, it was having a thorough understanding of, at this stage of my life, what money is and how it works. And when you look into that, even for an hour or two, and spend some time reading or studying, you know that almost by definition, the role of money is to store the work that you have expended in the present time so that you can exchange it in the future for other stuff that you want. And therefore, it is presumed if you are saving the money that in doing so, you're benefiting from saving it. And that benefit would come from the ability to purchase more or afford the thing in the future that you couldn't afford today, right? So by its definition, to hold money, when people buy gold, they buy gold under the assumption that that gold will have a greater purchasing power in the future than it does today. And that's why people save in gold and always saved in gold, because it would preserve and even grow their purchasing power into the future as they got to benefit from productivity. So if you are going to call Bitcoin gambling for this reason, then everything is any store of value is gambling, because you are always storing value in something that you hope will be more valuable in the future, which means its price relative to everything else has increased because its purchasing power has increased. And I guess
Interesting, yeah, that you have this how you found this and was this view controversial among your Muslim friends, or did they understand that? Did they have a role in shaping it?
no, I think amongst my friends, no, it probably wasn't controversial. But the minute I started posting about it online, it became controversial online. So many Muslims will be in my comments often telling me that it's haram, or that it's gambling, or the uncertainty, speculation. And it's just a shame because, and no, I didn't get any pushback from my friends on that. But then there have been other Muslims who I know, not online, but in real life, and when I've mentioned it to them, they obviously have these questions. Immediately they go to but is it not haram for these reasons? It often just stems around a misunderstanding, and with the greatest respect to the people who give the fatwas and the rulings on saying that this is haram, they're not experts in economics or monetary theory or financial markets. They are extremely good experts in matters of religion and fiqh. But
They are exposed, like all of us, they are exposed to the anti-Bitcoin propaganda that is a statist and very widespread propaganda due to the fact that states and banks support this propaganda. So I can
yes,
understand why they are exposed to this misinformation about Bitcoin. And like one of the main arguments I use is that if Islam is very clear about the importance of the precise scales, so Bitcoin would be the most precise scale that we ever had in history,
yes,
because it's not inflating. So it's like when we say 1 centimeter for measuring length,
yes,
uh, we don't, add more length with
yeah,
the time. We just stick to this length,
yeah. I think
whether whether we are now faster or slower, we stick to this centimeter and meter and kilometer.
yeah,
So Bitcoin is 21 million pieces or units, and we stick to that, and this will measure our productivity and our work and our energy. So
yeah,
it's an Islamic tool. Like our Muslims are actually obliged always to have the superior and best tools for making trade. So
yes.
Uh,
And I think for me, the moment of realization for me as well was that, of course, for me, I came from a position where I became a Muslim while I was, you know, someone who invested a lot in the stock market, and I invested in a lot of shit coins. Like so, and so I was still, that was something I was doing as I became a Muslim.
yeah,
So and at that point, someone would have told me that absolutely everything I was doing was haram, in terms of the financial investments I was making, which I did take seriously. I really reevaluated what I was putting my money into, and the types of companies I was investing in. But the claim to me of Bitcoin being haram, for whether it's for the reasons given of criminality, of speculation, of uncertainty, of gambling, they never stood up to the test for me
yeah,
when you actually assessed it like
yeah,
from first principles. What is it? What does it claim to do? Does it do what it claims to do? And how does it do it? And when you
yeah,
look at that and you really get into how the thing works, and
yeah,
it and the it almost like perfection of what has been designed. Obviously nothing is perfect that was created by
mm,
man, but this thing really is built to provide what it claims to be, which is just simply a sound money. And
mm,
at that point, for me, sound money, it didn't mean as much as it did as I started to learn more about my religion, about Islam, because then for me, the bit that really, really, it wasn't so much a case that I noticed things about Bitcoin that made me think, well, it's definitely not haram. It was more that the more I learned about Islam, the more I realized that Bitcoin was halal, because the first thing for me was understanding the Card Hassan loans. And the idea of Card Hassan in Islam is that someone is in need, you lend them money, and they pay you back the exact same amount, right? There is no extra fee on top. There is no interest payment. There's no riba. There's no gain in it at all. It is, I lend you £100 and you give me £100 back when we agreed to, or when you're able to repay it. And it's considered, there's barakah in doing a Card Hassan loan like this. Yeah,
and when you get the money back, it has more purchasing power because productivity has risen
exactly.
with time. So
This is it.
you don't need. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and it was when I learned about Card Hassan, and I thought, why do we not do more of this? Like, I know that my local masjid at the time was trying to raise money for a refurb and asking people for Card Hassan loans. And, it took a long time to raise that money. And then I looked at it from what I knew about fiat money and its inflationary nature. And I realized that fiat
Impossible.
money makes Card Hassan structurally like impossible, because
True.
with the greatest will in the world, you are not just
Yeah,
lending to have returned to you what you lent. You are, by being charitable, you are penalized. And to me, that makes that incompatible with Islam. So
yeah,
that was the first thing for me that really made me inquire a bit deeper and think, well, on the one hand, you've got something that is incompatible with Card Hassan, and on the other hand, you've got something that encourages Card Hassan. So, which one of those two things is halal and which is haram? And then there is other elements of Bitcoin that you start to learn. When you look at the teachings of trade and finances in Islam, the importance of sound money is everywhere. The importance of just measures. Even in the Bible, Jesus kicked out the money changers from the temple because they were taking a good quality coin from people, I believe, and giving them back bad quality coins, right? So they were giving them something less valuable back in return. And this is what fiat money inherently is. You store it in a bank, you store it anywhere, you're given it, you're paid it, and it degrades and it erodes over time. You are
yeah.
given, when you decide you want to use it in the future, you're now left with something worth a lot less, but by no fault of your own. And then there is just the general principles of sound money and what it does for time preference in a society. And you start to realize that Islam is all about low time preference, and everything about it is the ultimate. It is the ultimate. Um, it's the ultimate display of low time preference. Um,
Sure.
you know, with everything that you do, you have the akira in mind. Okay, and this is like, and then you look at society and you think, what is it about society that's like so detached from that? And it's this just constant focus on trying to battle against the tide. You know, you can't keep up. You're fighting against the tide all the time. You're just going at 100 miles per hour, having to focus on the immediate, the immediate. And that is, again, in complete opposition to Islam. And you look into why that is, and you see it's quite clearly because of the issues with the value of money and the purchasing power of money constantly eroding. It means that you cannot plan for the future. And if you can't plan
Yeah.
for a year or two in the future, how are you going to plan for the next life? How are you going to plan for eternity? Um, and you start to realize that all of these things inherent in the system, the modern kind of financial system, the fiat money system, it just in itself is so in opposition to all those teachings, or the societal behaviors that it invokes are totally different to what we're taught we need to strive for. And
Yeah.
when you look at it through that lens, I think that's for me when I realized that, everything, it's even the establishment of waqfs in a society. How can a waqf last for so long and continue to provide for people and generations if nothing can preserve its value? It's not like they can have a treasury of a sound money. They could have a treasury of gold, um, but the concept of a waqf is everything it's all about low time preference, and it's all about someone being able to give something to society for after they're gone, and it to remain there and continue providing value. Now, how can you have such a thing in a world where just simply maintaining that waqf, the cost of maintaining it, is going to just slowly drain everything from it? You just
Yeah.
can't do that. You can't do these things with fiat money. And for me, then it was a case of, if you balance up the two, um, what is halal and what is haram? Like from a just first principles, if you assess it in that way, um, for me that was it. It wasn't one single thing. It definitely started with the understanding of Qad Hassan, and how Qad Hassan is basically just structurally impossible. And in fact, it's discouraged, whereas an inflationary money supply and the system we live in, it actively encourages riba. And not only actively encourages it, it makes it basically rational. You would be irrational if you didn't charge riba, but it embeds it into everything. And that for me was just, there was no question from that point about how I felt
Yeah, yeah.
about it.
Within the this system that we have, which is not capitalistic, we have to always insist that we are not in a capitalistic world. We are in a system called creditism,
Yeah.
and it's inflationary. It's based on credit and creation of money of out of thin air by the government and with the force of government. And so we should insist, like it's funny that because in nikah, in marriage contracts, we insist that we use gold, for the what you call it, the money that the husband give for his wife, so to preserve value. But in everything else, we accepted the money of this temple. So Islam did not invent the technology of gold, but it adopted it very successfully, and the golden dinar stayed very stable and pure even after the fall of Andalusia in Europe. The golden dinar was something like a standard, yeah, to for that people try to obtain. Um, but what I want to talk about is like drawing some parallels between the influences that Islam had on Europe or on the West in the past, and the situation today,
Yeah,
like what you and your generation are experiencing today, with regards to Islam and its influence on the West, and uh, and trying to learn from the past what were um, the influence that Islam had on uh, uh, on Europe and the West.
yeah.
So, because there's a very important book called The Islamic Roots of Capitalism. I don't know if you are aware about.
It's on my list. It's one of the
Yeah,
next books
very
I'm going to
good.
be ordering. Yeah,
Yeah, it's very good. And basically gives an alternative history of capitalism and the Industrial Revolution. Uh, and draws attention uh, to the Islamic model of finance and trade and how it influenced Italy and Spain and eventually the whole Europe,
yeah,
and the West. Um, and today as we said, we have this better societal model as Muslims in the West, but we don't have this financial
yeah,
tools that can, enforce, that can empower this model even more.
yes,
And that's why I'm like really interested to hear your
yeah,
experience with your friends, Muslim friends, and how we can expand this adoption of sound money and this technology of Bitcoin into our societies here in the West.
yeah. It's a great topic to talk about because there's so many parallels to draw, because if you look at the history of it, the spread of Islam was due to its ability to allow people to conduct trade freely, and its methods for trade that it introduced that allowed people to basically it provided individuals with liberty when it came to the matters in which they conducted trade, right?
Mm.
So, and this is why it spread so rapidly, all like
Yeah,
thousand the one nearly 1,600 years ago is because 1,400 is because you had a model of trade and commerce that gave the individual liberty and protected them from oppression and allowed them
yeah,
to conduct their affairs freely.
yeah.
And
Because there was no caste system like the one in India, and there
yeah,
was no guilds system that was in medieval Europe that
yeah,
prevented people from uh, of throwing trade and industry, etc.
yeah. This is it,
Right?
and this kind of liberation for those people was well received, and they were able to, under an Islamic rule, which was welcomed by the people, resisted, of course, by those in power. But they were finally able to conduct trade and um, pursue their goals in life without obstacle, right? And this spread everywhere, and the way that Islamic society conducted itself in trade and commerce spread everywhere. It influenced Venice, which ended up becoming a financial capital of the world, initially on a very sound monetary system until it failed, until its soundness started to erode.
Yes.
Um, the Hawala system of international trade, that was a huge influence that spread around the world, that it originated in Islamic societies and Arab countries. You have the system of the Waqf, which was so heavily influential that it spread all the way to England. Then, like, you've got Oxford University and its endowment that was modelled of the Islamic Waqf, and to this day still follows that same model. So many influences there that spread like so far and wide, and that are still here today. I even often sometimes, like, to me, I'm like, I look at the way Islam, I look at Islam from like a societal perspective, and the type of society that tends to form with Islam being present there. And if I look at, for example, the original American Constitution, for example, to me that's something that doesn't. It's actually, the two are pretty compatible to a degree, of course, not in every way. But if you look on what the United States was established on, it was actually a system that was trying to protect its society from many of the same pitfalls that Islam tries to protect a society from. Unfortunately, it's strayed so far away from there. But all of these influences, and there's so many, they're all, a lot of them are still present. And yeah, that spread, it really spread. Like, that model of conducting trade, it spread everywhere. And the thing is, it's not even that bizarre of a thing when you actually look at what does Islam teach about trade and economics. It is ultimately probably the perfect model of free trade, of a truly free market. You know, we know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he refused to set prices because he said prices, Allah sets prices. And then you look at the work of Adam Smith centuries and centuries later, and all he's doing is redescribing, as if it's in some profound new way, the invisible hand. The invisible hand is Allah. I would also say that there was there was other elements there that are ultimately, I think actually, Muslim Bitcoiner in his book Anti-Riba Money uses a phrase that I love because it represents it much better, which is the nurturing of capital. And the nurturing of capital is like, it's so present in the way that Islam teaches you to be with your finances. It's nurturing capital, right? It's not just acquiring and storing capital. And I much prefer this phrase because it talks about, when you talk about nurturing capital, what you're talking about is making sure that the enterprises that you embark on, and the businesses that you build, they don't, for example, destroy the land so that it stops being productive for future generations, and that you don't poison the soil, because you're not just trying to acquire more capital, you are nurturing capital so that it lasts for longer. This whole concept of kind of what free market capitalism is supposed to be is so similar to the Islamic economic model and that model of prophetic trade, where you have everything is centered around risk sharing, engaging in shared risk and shared profit, rather than so equity-based financing, equity-based ventures rather than debt-based.
You know that risk, you just mentioned risk taking,
Yeah,
and the word comes from risk. You
yes,
know that this word came from the word risk, because the traders of Venice that you mentioned, when they were asking the Arab and Muslim traders why they are putting themselves in dangerous situations when they go to America and to India, and so they were answering them, the Muslims were answering them, we are taking our risk, you know?
subhanallah. I
Subhanallah.
didn't know that's where it came from.
That's why we say in English, take a risk.
Yeah,
The meaning changed a little bit. It
yeah.
became putting themselves in a risky situation or dangerous situation. But risky and risk is come from risk. This is a well documented fact, yeah, that it's the etymology comes from Arabic, an
Ah,
Arabic or Muslim, yeah, concept, taking risk.
wow. I learned
Yeah,
something new here because yeah, that's cool.
yeah,
I didn't know that. That's very
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
And it's like you look at when you look at these things as well, it's and it's a shame because like Bitcoin has been tainted, its name has been tainted by all these other altcoins and scams and Ponzi schemes. The word capitalism has been tainted
Mm,
by what we have now, which is not capitalism at all in its truest, purest sense. What capitalism is meant to be
mm,
is um, is a capitalistic system of production, which simply means foregoing immediate consumption for a longer length of production for a greater quality and quantity of goods in the future. That's it. That's all it's meant to mean, and that
yeah,
means lowering time preference and building for the future. That's what it's meant to be.
yeah,
That is free market capitalism, and with free market capitalism, it means there is no one setting prices. Prices are set by the invisible hand or Allah, and you know people act. But to me, there is one thing. There is one thing missing because obviously I have read into Austrian economics a lot heavily,
mm,
and I was obviously inspires a lot of my thinking and my what I believe how I believe an economy should operate, and not just how it should operate, but logically how it will operate, because all it is a big collection of human beings making decisions, right? In their own self-interest most of the time. But if you look at that model, and then you look at like kind of the libertarian um, side of things that stems very much from Austrian economics, there is always that question there where you look at it of basically individuals acting in their own self-interest will produce optimal outcomes, and people who behave or act or conduct themselves in ways that are destructive to a society or that are harmful or greedy or monopolistic, the free market will take care of them and it will punish them because people will stop doing business with them, people will stop buying from them, and a free market and free competition allows a competitor to come up, provide a better customer experience, provide goods at a fairer price, and take out these bad actors, right? And
yeah,
I agree with that maybe 95%. And
mm,
because to me, the missing piece is given to us in Islam, which is basically this model. It is this model of free markets. Allah sets the prices, right? It is free trade. It is the ability to nurture capital. You know, the zakat takes care of the wealth distribution, and when you and it's like a zakat to take care of wealth distribution is such a nice simple way of doing it, but you can't use that in a world where you're taxing everyone every single day for every single thing
mm,
that they spend and every single thing that
mm,
they earn. You know, it's you either have something like that to redistribute, or you have the other thing. I mean, I don't agree in the other thing at all, but you know, the point I was getting to is without going on a tangent, is that for me, with that libertarian model of everyone acting in their own self-interest, everyone acting in their own self-interest in a um, society of atheists, I don't believe produces the best outcomes necessarily a lot of the time. But
yeah,
where that model for me is perfect is the free market economic approach of Islam, where for a Muslim to be acting in their self-interest, it the byproduct of that is quite altruistic by default, because as a Muslim acting in your own self-interest, you are acting, that means you're acting in a way that is pleasing Allah and not angering Allah. And it means that you are lowering your time preference as much as it can possibly be lowered and looking beyond this worldly life. And the things that you do here in this life are going to, they're going to be brought up on the day of
mm,
judgment. And if you wrong people, it's going to be held against you. And what is pleasing to Allah, and what you get rewarded greatly for is the things that you leave behind for future generations. It can be knowledge, it can be charity, it could be a water well, it could be a library, it could be a school. There is such huge amounts of barakah in these things, and it's so greatly encouraged. And we know this is where the model of the waqf came from. This is why
Yeah.
waqfs were so important in Islamic societies, and they really provide. There was no need for a socialist state because you had waqfs in this bottom-up manner that were providing for communities. Now, if I'm a Muslim acting in my own self-interest, that means I'm in pursuit of all of these things. For my own self-interest, I'm incentivized to leave a waqf for future generations. I am incentivized to lower my time preference and really think about the future. I'm discouraged from making acting out of greed. I'm encouraged to give charity. I'm discouraged from other things. And to me, that is where that model is perfected. You have this free market, this kind of free market economics governed by Allah. Your self-interest becomes inherently altruistic. And therefore, if I build a road that lasts for 100 years after I die, I'm going to get barakah from that because that road is providing trade routes for people. It's providing a quick way for people to go and visit their family. If I build a school, I'm providing education. If I build a hospital, I'm providing healthcare to people, and I get barakah for all of this.
Yeah,
And
abundance.
yeah,
This is a very, very important concept in Islam that God provides abundance for the people who purify themselves. Yeah, I would like to add something about why Islam is more appropriate system of thought, like economically,
yeah,
because the libertarians say we own ourselves,
yeah,
you know, and we say God owns ourselves, and
yeah.
we're. This is very important because
This is it. This is
because
it. This it's like the main difference in the Islamic economic
yeah,
model. We're accountable
yeah,
to Allah, and in
yeah,
the libertarian model, they're just accountable to themselves.
themselves, yeah, and this
Yeah,
led Rothbard to say some stupid things.
yeah,
But I mean, there are very few stupid things that he said, but I think if he been an atheist, he would not say that,
yes.
probably.
Because
Yeah,
Islamic economics really it is free market capitalism, and this is a system that works. It
mm,
works when you as a people are governed by Allah and when you're accountable to Allah and when you and that's why for me it's like it really is a Muslim acting in their own self-interest is altruistic, and by default they end up acting out of the interest of those around them because that's what's
yeah.
pleasing to Allah.
Also, the Sharia, the ultimate goals of Sharia, they are about this, like
Yeah,
preserving oneself, preserving the sanity, preserving the
yeah.
money, and
And
preserving the religion.
you know what was an interesting one that I was thinking the other day because I'm reading at the moment I'm reading von Bauck, his positive theory of capital.
Mm,
He wrote 3 volumes on the on capital and interest.
mm,
He came after Charles Menger, and then
mm,
but he was before von Mises or von Mises.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm,
So von
mm,
Mises references his work a lot, and I'm reading his book,
ah,
and
good idea.
I was thinking about at one point he was really breaking down um,
Mm,
the formation of capital in a society, and basically that the more really simple stuff that we know about how the formation of capital um, is going to depend on how mature. So the maturity of a country or of a society's process of capitalistic production is basically going to determine how much of their year's labor is going to have to go towards um, providing for immediate consumption and how much of it can be, you know, uh, preserved for the years ahead. And it breaks down how in a situation where a society had a shortage, that a previous years of capitalistic production would allow them to get through it without problem, because they would have saved up the productive powers of 5 years, for example, and have therefore be provided for. All their needs would be provided for. And I just started thinking about the story, of Yusuf alayhi salam, where he was in prison in Egypt, and
for preserving the wheat.
yeah, and I just thought right there, that story of Yusuf alayhi salam is such a great representation in the Quran about preservation of capital, and that it shouldn't be looked upon as this great evil in Islam, when you have a story here, really one of the really well-known stories of the prophets, which shows how through the preservation of capital he saved loads of lives from starvation.
And I once had a friend, he's a Muslim, but he's a Marxist.
Yeah.
And he was telling me, yeah, capital preservation is not good. And I told him, even animals preserve capital,
Yeah.
They store and hoard
Yeah.
nuts and all kinds of things. There's a lot of interesting
Yeah.
facts about, ravens and birds, that how they have a very complicated way to preserve their needs for the
Yeah.
winter.
Yeah.
And
It's funny that, because when Marxists or socialists say this stuff, it's funny because in a Marxist society or a socialist society, they are still engaging in the capitalist form of production. It's just the state that's doing it and directing all of it, So the state is enforcing everyone to engage in what they believe is the best form of capitalistic production. And they are forcing the whole of society to actually forego their immediate wants and needs and the satisfaction of those wants, and they are forcing them into a longer roundabout way of production that is dictated entirely by the state. So the process of production is still capitalistic, but it's completely misguided, and because there are no real economic signals involved, it always results in disaster, and it always results in famine. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, this is something else we could do an entire podcast on, is that because Muslims are for some reason really sympathetic to socialism, and I just don't get it.
that we are looking for allies, and we are only for our causes, like Palestine or any other cause, and we usually find only the socialists. And this is one of the main reasons why Marxism and socialism became interesting for Muslims. But Muslims in themselves, like what I had always this, struggle between the Marxist ideas that I'm reading and the conduct of my father and of my family and of my society. We are all, traders, and like this is in our blood, like especially in the Levant, people are so entrepreneurial. So
it's we should do a specific podcast or episode where we break down what the realities of free market capitalism and versus kind of socialism and centrally controlled economies, and how they relate to actually the teachings of Islam. It's people can make up their own minds, but that would be a really good thing to do for people.
In Islam, coercion is forbidden, and state is all about coercion. So like from Islamic thought, I don't have any problem to establish a total, destruction of this statist and socialist ideology. It needs to be talked about. That's it.
It does. It really does. Yeah. Yeah, and I do
Cool.
think a lot of it stems from the issue we were
Mm.
discussing of we don't like it. Muslims are afraid. Muslims in the West are afraid of adopting um, things that are not, like given the green tick by the state. Like, and this is the thing with Bitcoin, for example. There's too much of this
Yeah,
conversation. Is
yeah,
it haram? Is it halal? Like, oh,
yeah.
it's risk. Like
That's why
the
the brothers in America are doing better than us.
yeah, yeah. I
Because
mean, you just
statism,
if you look at Dallas, for example, Dallas, that community in Dallas in whole, every it's very entrepreneurial, and they're not afraid to
yeah.
adopt change.
And this is like a European disease, you know. The
Yeah,
state is, I mean,
yeah.
the Americans, uh,
They're
they are like
revolutionaries.
the people. Yeah, they escaped statism
Yeah,
basically to establish a new world that it's not statist.
yeah.
Statism here is still very, very, very strong,
It's in
and
people's blood
Muslims
here.
and, and destroyed a lot of our culture.
Yeah,